everyone that is here with us this afternoon. We will start by establishing the quorum. However, let me do this first before our lawyer gives me the eye here. I know what I need to read. Let me read this here. Sorry. It's one of those days. All right. Pursuant to the provisions of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, please take notice that decisions of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County Community Oversight Board may be appealed to the Chancery Court of Davidson County for review under a common law writ of cert. Any appeal must be filed within 60 days after entry of a final decision by the board. Any person or other entity considering an appeal should consult with an attorney to ensure that time and procedural requirements are met. Thank you. As far as the establishing quorum, we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're only missing 2 members of our board today, Mr. Martinez and Dr. Lewis, I believe. So we certainly have quorum. Thank you. I don't have it here in the minutes here, but I'd like to first look at our minutes from our last meeting. I will hear a motion to accept the minutes for Tuesday, April 2nd, our last meeting.
So moved.
Mr. Chief Turner, thank you. Second?
Second that.
Mr. Campbell-Gooch, thank you. Any focused discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. Next, we have our, it says chair remarks here. To be as thoughtful as I can with our time here, I did write down my notes here, and first and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge and welcome our new executive director, Mr. William Whedon. Mr. William Whedon is worthy of clapping for his welcome. Mr. Whedon, if you could, I'd like to welcome you. In fact, if you could sit here with us, we'd love to hear from you. I asked Mr. Whedon to prepare just brief, and I said brief, and I said, and I know we're in Nashville. You're back in Nashville with no Baptist preacher. I'm picking on my own here. Remarks here, but we certainly like to hear how your first couple of days have been, and also extend to you an opportunity to welcome yourself back to Nashville. So, Mr. Whedon.
Well, thank you. I want to thank you all for giving me this wonderful opportunity to serve as the executive director of the Community Oversight Board.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking forward to serving the community of Nashville and all of its citizens, and to increasing the relationship between the Metropolitan Police Department and the citizens of the community that it serves. I'm also looking for, I've had some, you asked how it's been, everyone has been wonderful. Everyone with the Metropolitan Davidson County has been wonderful. We've taken great steps towards staffing the department. Looking forward to doing that. I think that we have some wonderful talent here in Nashville, and we're recruiting people from nationally, and it looks like we'll be able to find a diverse group of candidates that have good integrity, and that will do some good investigations and go wherever the investigation leads them. So that's what we're looking forward to. So the ultimate goal here is to build trust in the police department, build trust for the citizens of Nashville, and I'm looking forward to doing that as expeditiously as possible. And once again, I want to thank everyone for the opportunity, and we're ready to get to work here.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Whedon. And I would actually ask if you could hold there for now in your placement. I didn't get a chance to speak with our counsel, Alex Dickerson, on this, but when we move into the bylaws as well as the rules portion, I think it would be helpful, because I know Mr. Whedon has been spending a considerable amount of time reviewing, to at least have his presence here, and we can certainly decide as a board how we need to officially do that. But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't. It's at least, and if anyone has dissenting opinions, let me know. Figure out a way to incorporate those thoughts here. So, does the board have any thoughts on that? Alex, is that permissible?
That's fine.
Okay, any thoughts one way or the other, or something? Okay, if not, Mr. Whedon, please feel free to join us here.
Yes.
The next thing I want to make sure that everyone knows about, so one of the things that Mr. Whedon activated very quickly on was the need to have a meeting with between the COB and Metro Nashville Police Department. He reached out before his first day, asked to be connected to the chief as well as executive members of the police department. We have a meeting on the calendar for May the 1st, May 1st. I believe I'm correct on the date there, Marcus. I believe it's in the afternoon. So I believe right now a number of people in the meeting is 4 or 5 people. I will share, and I think we'll talk a bit about this, but I believe that that date, I may not be in town. I do not know yet. That's why I haven't answered the meeting invitation. If not, I will certainly communicate that as proper order. Mr. Campbell Gooch would be the next in line to participate and attend that. And there's not much more to share with that. I do think that it's important that folks be aware of it. We'll also send around the agenda that Mr. Whedon has developed for that meeting. Mr. Whedon, do you want to say anything on that as far as the purpose of the meeting?
Well, the purpose of the meeting, of course, is to introduce myself and the Community Oversight Board to the Metropolitan Police Department and the Office of Professional Accountability. So that's the main purpose. We have some issues on the agenda that we need to address, dealing with basically some of the parameters of the investigation, sharing evidence, going to the crime scene, things of that nature that we need to discuss, which are very important. So those are the main topics of the agenda. Just setting up the ground rules on how we interact. Of course, with OPA, we share some of the same responsibilities, so we want to make sure that we're on the same page with them about those responsibilities and how we divide them up if we need to.
Thank you, Mr. Whedon. Any questions from the board, members of the board? Mr. Whedon, would be extremely helpful, and I say that also for the member of the board that attends, whether it be myself or Mr. Campbell Gooch, that for the next board meeting, be prepared to share your notes or the do-outs from that space. I think that would be helpful to all that are not able to attend in person, and that we understand if there's any next steps as well as we move forward. Let me speak also to one of the topics that came up during the executive committee meeting. So during my conversation with Ms. Hall, I had a meeting with Ms. Hall and also the members of the finance team as well, and we went over some of the personnel as well as the needs of the office. When we did kind of this 10,000-foot look, it was apparent to me, at least I felt, that there was a need still that was a bit unmatched and unmet at the time, and that is by way of the administrative assistant, right? So there's currently no line item or no description in the nine positions that ties someone specifically to, front house operations, whether that be the phones or payroll, someone that, quite frankly, could be an executive assistant also to Mr. Whedon. And so I asked Ms. Hall, I asked and members in the finance team and finance director as well, to help us create a 10th position that would fill that responsibility, that role. During the executive committee meeting, the question was asked about what type of position this would be. I want to read exactly what was shared with me. This position is an administrative assistant, and the general job description is also attached. I'll share that. As to the question whether this position could take on non-administrative tasks in addition to the job duties, that would likely depend on what non-administrative tasks we're speaking of. And really the question was from Ms. Hildreth, who was asking, well, will this person be exclusively focused in on administrative tasks, or could they also be utilizing, additional capacities as needed by leadership of, Mr. Whedon and others? It sounds like there's space for us based on what task it would be. It also allows, my hope, however, in addition to this, is that we could likely find someone who has Metro experience, who's coming in and able to help stand this office up on the operational and logistics side. We are in position now. The pay grade would be in line with I believe it's something 4. I'm going to butcher it. But it's the proper language of that title, right? We're not creating a unicorn here. It exists elsewhere. We did look across the space at other boards and other offices to make sure that we weren't just creating our own wheel here. And so I can assure you of that. What I wanted to make sure is that the board is comfortable with this and sees purpose in it as well. And I say to this is that, of course, when the framers of the board and the language were putting this together, it's very easy to understand why they really weren't thinking about the administrative task or what it would take to stand this department up. This is a department, not just an office as well, and so we need to think about that is really where I stood. But I'm open to thoughts here, and I also want to make sure that the board is on point here, and if so, then I'd love to hear a motion to accept that, to adopt that 10th position formally. So, Mr. Cooper. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Ross. I'm sorry.
Okay, and in that preparation, we talking about administrative positions, offices, trips, trainings.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen a budget, line item, or anything. So when are we talking, or when can we see something in terms of a budget?
Yeah.
For the Community Oversight Board?
Absolutely.
Because we can approve a lot of things, but do we have money for it?
Yeah, no, it's a perfect question. So actually today is Wednesday. Monday, I sat down with a gentleman by the name of David Edwards to see what is right now, to be honest with you, it is, I say it's beyond first draft, second draft, right? That meeting that I'm describing right now that I only had because of when we're meeting, I haven't had a chance to share out beyond today, was really to understand what things we think we might need. So they wanted to hear from us that we think we need 10 computers for everyone in the office so that they could go back and do what is likely kind of a rough draft. What I'm prepared to share now, what he shared with us on Monday, Mr. Wheaton was there with us, was essentially, does this look like it makes sense? And then what I've asked Mr. Wheaton to do was figure out what's missing. Now, I'm happy to share this out with you. We just received it ourselves, but it's not a matter of it. It's not going to move forward before the board gets a chance to see it. Ms. Ross. Oh, Mr. Cooper, I thought you had a follow-up. Mr. Cooper.
Go ahead.
I was simply going to say, one, this is a position we need. In fact, I was thinking about that myself this week in preparation for this meeting. Two, we have the authority under our Metro Charter provision that the board should be fully operational and staffed by sufficient members of personnel to competently carry out its duties. I think having someone who is working the phones and providing assistance to the positions laid out in this charter is not only helpful, probably critical to performing our duties. So I'm happy to make the motion to approve taking the necessary steps toward creating and filling such a position.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. And we can come to focused discussion. Does anyone second this motion by Mr. Cooper?
Second.
Mr. Swinney, thank you. Focused discussion. We can include this in the discussion here, Ms. Ross, unless you're, because I'm sure it's tied to the budget still. Yes, ma'am.
I'll wait a little longer. I'm still, it is about the budget.
Okay.
I'm still not clear. I heard what you said.
Yep.
However, as the council, do we have a budget that has been approved for the council as of this date? Or where are we spending money from? Where are we spending the money from?
Okay. So the budget is not gone to council yet because it is not, we haven't said.
How much money are we spending right now? It's coming up from a
Oh, well, right
source.
now we're in the fiscal year so for instance, and we don't have our budget person here, but for instance, we haven't done any travel, right? And even with the travel NYU, that's not on us. And I said in a previous budget board meeting, we were not going to be spending something that didn't exist. However, what they have prepared is essentially a budget that, and I haven't seen like this number. Oh no, Mr. Wheaton, I think it was a number they included in there. They didn't give us a spreadsheet to say like this has been approved. And Marcus, if I'm wrong here, let me know. But as far as I know, we don't have a budget that has been fully approved here. Ms. Hall, do you know anything different?
I'll let the department head speak to it, but as I understand it, the office
Office of Budget Management will have to submit a supplemental
Mhm.
appropriation to council to be approved.
Mhm.
And in order to do that, we have to know what the department needs.
Mhm.
And so this is a part of that process. The meeting that Mr. Whedon and Chair Davis had on Monday was part of that process to fill out the supplemental request that goes to council.
Is that for this year or
It'll
for
be
next year?
It'll be for the remaining
Remaining.
portion of this year.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to,
Mhm.
okay.
Yep, for the remaining portion
Of
of
this
this
fiscal
fiscal year,
Okay.
which is what, up until June 30th?
Yes.
Okay.
And then
Yeah.
the full budget for the COB, because there are some budget considerations that are in your charter amendment, right? So it
Mhm.
has to be in accordance with that. That'll be recommended by the mayor and filed no later than May 1, which is 1 week away.
Mhm.
And then the council will contemplate on that budget and then approve the final budget no later than June 30th. Otherwise, the mayor's recommended budget defaults.
And while we're, Mr. Ross, any follow-up question? So what, let me back up here, because I don't think I have the ability to pull up what was sent to me. We can't do this, though. I believe that unless they tell me otherwise, I should at the very least be able to forward the spreadsheet that was sent to me. For some reason, I cannot open. The only way I'm able to see it is when I'm in these conference rooms with them, and that might be because of my applications. I have problems, and probably because I have a Mac or something. It's just problematic for me. But we can send that out. I can tell you that the majority of the $1.5 million budget is going towards our salary of our 9 and potentially 10 members of the staff and their health benefits. Beyond that, I did, and Mr. Whedon saw also, there's a space there for training, and that training would cover, of course, the members of the COB personnel, but also the board as needed. And there was space in there also. The biggest line item I saw in there was something called host/hostess. And the way they explained it was if the COB decided that you wanted to host an event, like we had dinner, pizza, or whatever that I brought in a couple of weeks ago for our last meeting. Other than that, though, I'll make sure that we get this. I mean, I shared in the meeting there that it was going to need to go in front of everyone. There is right now a small little pocket of money that is not accounted for, and which is a good thing because Mr. Whedon pointed out that there's nothing in there currently for software licensing, so that we can have complaints and I think evidentiary software licensing. And so I asked him to also look up what the cost of that might be, so that by the time we share it with you all, we are considering the full totality of the information. What I do believe by way of the finance team, the budget team, is that they need to hear from us rather soon what we want to do, like what we want to submit. And I did share with them that might mean that by some measurement we have to huddle, whether it's quickly by call, but at least you need a couple of days to digest this, because it took me a bit of time just sitting there. We had an hour plus long to go line by line, and I needed that. Unfortunately, I just don't look at budgets every day, but I look at them enough to know that you need a narrative behind it. So are there any other thoughts or questions on this? Mr. Sweeney?
Just one question. If the mayor has to submit by May 1,
Right.
how does that fit with our timing of doing anything?
Yeah, and that's sort of, I hear that, and I mean, we're not in our home base of like in the courthouse where we can run and print here, so it makes it a bit difficult. We also don't have like a screen where somebody's computer wouldn't show up on mine. But even if it's a matter of, Marcus, can I just send it to the board?
I mean, I think so. I've just emailed David to make sure.
See if we can,
that's okay.
yeah, because I don't know that,
makes sense to me.
he knew that I was coming to the board meeting to talk about the budget.
Right.
It's on the matter here in front of us. Mr. Sweeney?
Just a follow-up question on that. Even if it comes out to us, I'm not sure how we can act on it because we can only act in person because of the public records.
Because of the public records, we can't
Issue.
do anything.
Call meeting.
Yeah, what'd you say, Ms. Ross?
Call meeting.
To have the conversation. And next week becomes so sticky with, not picking on you, but you and Dr. Lewis being elsewhere. Ms. Hildreth?
Thank you.
Mr. Holloway, I'm sorry, I'll come right to you after that.
The
city will be having a budget hearing coming up soon. And we should have a basic idea of what we really need for the upcoming year. And when it does, we need to have a layout plan. So this is what we need to operate, to be efficient. And so that's something that we need to be working on, you know, whether the executive director needs certain equipment for the computers and stuff like that, all that need to be included, nothing left out.
And it is, yeah, it is indeed. And if I can, what I think might be helpful in us in the short term here is if, and while it won't pop up on my phone, it's possible either on Marcus's or otherwise, I can just go line item and read you the amount and the, you know, the title of it and the amount. And that way, at least we can write it out. It's not so much that it wouldn't be easier, you know, feasible, but what I don't want anyone to feel like is they haven't had an opportunity to view it and voice their perspective here. That's not what I want. Ms. Ross. Well, Ms. Hildreth and then Ms. Ross. I passed over her.
Thank you. So I think I had 2 points. One, in terms of the open meetings requirement and the ability to comment, now that we have an executive director, each of us board members can always communicate directly with Mr. Wheaton. Is that correct?
Sure.
So that if we receive the budget, we can start asking questions, making suggestions, and go to Mr. Wheaton. If Mr. Wheaton and the chair are sitting together and feel that we have raised questions that cannot properly be reconciled with the two of them in the room, then I'm assuming that the chair would leave for a called meeting so that we could talk to each other. But otherwise, our ability, hub and spoke now, is to go to the executive director. Is that correct?
Yeah. My
second, I do want to piggyback on the back of Member Ross's question about whose money are we spending. We are, Mr. Wheaton, I assume you're getting paid right now. That was rhetorical. If that is the case, then is it fair to assume that the mayor's office is backing us with reasonable and expected expenses that will be fully articulated and anticipated within the supplemental budget? And those expenses will also form part of the basis for the formal budget request going forward. Is that correct?
That was my understanding of the finance. Mr. Floyd, yours as well.
Okay. Then my third and last point is, and I'm bringing forward a comment that I made in the executive committee meeting from the previous week. Amendment 1, copies of which was provided in our packet, and for those viewing at home, is posted on the COB website, does provide in section 11-1302, powers and duties number 5, that the mayor shall submit the budget when complied. And it also talks about the 9 position. My only concern from the executive committee meeting, and I'm bringing it forward here, is that we not be seen as exceeding the intent of Amendment 1 by adding the 10th position. And that is why I had asked the question about whether other duties could be rolled in, because I'm thinking as long as we stay within the net universe of the intent of what we were to do under Amendment 1 and getting the work done in the budget for this. But we are not here, if I vote on the motion that's on the floor, I'm going to be voting under the assumption that we are going to be operating for a total budget that still will stay within the $1.5 million.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Hildreth. Mr. Holloway, you are making no additional points. Any other discussion? Mr. Sweeney.
Just a general question regarding the budget and the 9 positions. Is it the sense that we want to fill all of those positions at one time, since we're still figuring out what we're going to do and how we're going to do it? Or are there budget savings that can be made by staging the hiring of people so as to bring them along as we're developing the need?
I think the discussions I've had have met now twice with Mr. Whedon is the plan is to fully staff the department.
Well, that's the plan. I think the most important positions to fill are, of course, the assistant director and the legal position. But the investigators are also important, so we need to staff that. And the research assistant positions, we may be able to wait to fill those positions. I think we can wait and see where the budget is to fill those positions, but the other positions are very important. We need to fill those as soon as possible.
Mr. Holloway, Ms. Hildreth, and then Mr. Cooper.
This is normally how it works. You don't want to stay within the budget. You want to outline what you need, and if they exceed the budget, maybe they will feel, if they see the need to give you that, then they will. But then it may fall back where you really want to be. But ask for more than what you really need.
Thank you, Mr. Holloway, Ms. Hildreth, Mr. Cooper.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I thought I said that.
Yes. So to Member Sweeney's point, we probably do have savings that we can accrue by coming in partially through the year and going forward. I'm still making sure that I'm voicing a concern that when we come up to full strength for a full budget year,
Right.
if that's now 10 positions and not 9, then there is no accrual in savings. And and particularly, it's one thing to say buy computers or buy software and realize that that's a problem and back off of the software subscription. It's a very different matter to commit to 10 individuals and find out that the 10 individuals are not going to be sustained within the $1.5 million that is authorized in the amendment. And I just want to say that I believe that that's very important, because with the way budgeting happens, there could still be a fight about the 1.5. And I want to make sure that we have a strong argument that was based in the will of the voters for the money that we spend. And I am trusting in Mr. Whedon's ability to look again at the totality of the circumstances and maybe find that the research assistant only needs to be a 60% position. And maybe part of that money then supports the 10th. So somehow, what was going to be anticipated 100% funding for 9 positions then works with whatever total percent for the 10 to get the work done. But I want to say that clearly right now so that we are not confused when 10 positions cost us more than we anticipated.
Ms. Hildreth, I appreciate your points. I can assure you, and I apologize for not having that information here in front of you, but like I shared, this conversation first came up during the budget meeting, so when David went out and created this, he showed us what this would look like under the 1.5 with the 10th role included, right? And so, and even then, we ended up with cushion that will allow us to have the licensing software. 10. He even went so far to say, okay, do you want? Let's just assume we're going to have 10 cell phones for everyone, right? We also included Salesforce licensing, not just for the 10 members of the staff, but 11 members of the board. And so he thought big here to ensure that, if we need to trim down somewhere, we are okay to do that, but we'll still be not even hitting that ceiling or right at that ceiling of 1.5. And I share your concern on the fiscal conservative. I mean, we need to be thoughtful here.
Thank you.
And prudent. I appreciate that. Mr. Cooper, and then Ms. Roth, I thought you were. Mr. Cooper.
So, and I, Ms. Hildreth and the others fully share that we have to be good stewards of our
Absolutely.
money, and we should budget conservatively. I think, though, if we're talking about the spirit of the charter amendment, and also to go back to Mr. Sweeney's point, I think we can ramp up as our workload requires. Nothing requires us to go out of the gate with 9 positions. And under the charter provision, there is no magic about the number 9. In fact, it talks about that being a minimum in several respects in that provision. So, even though we are talking about a position that might not be itemized here, I think we certainly have the power to do it. And there's an expectation here that, we will conceivably exceed 9 staff members. So, trusting that our budget looks correct, this does sound like to me a worthwhile position to fill.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Ms. Ross.
I still like to see a physical copy of the budget.
You will.
Read it to me and write it. No, I can't
Yeah,
do that.
I got you, Ms. Ross. I
So
wouldn't do
would
that
really
to
like
you.
to do that
We'll have
before
it
we
to you
vote.
this evening. I'll
Okay.
make sure you get it, the board gets it this evening. And then that way also, well, maybe we can put some parameters around, like asking you to look at it over the next 48 hours so that you can take that time and then share directly to Mr. Whedon your thoughts, questions, suggestions as well, right? Because you'll see there the little space of in the budget that we still need to fill. Tell us if you see something that's missing. I asked Mr. Whedon to go back in and look at his budgets from Chicago and elsewhere and see where maybe they, put forth funding for certain trainings that maybe we're just not thinking about, right? Because we started with just creating this. So I'll share this evening. The board has my commitment on that. Thank you. We are still in the focused discussion here of the motion that's on the floor. Any additional comments, thoughts here? Okay. With that, Mr. Cooper, would you mind restating your motion just because it's been a little bit of time?
Try to.
Okay.
That the motion is to approve the creation of an administrative assistant position, and to, I will say, approve funding of it consistent with the budget restraints given to us in the Metro Charter Amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. I'll do a fresh here. I think it was Mr. Sweeney who seconded. Is it you, Mr. Sweeney? Or was it Chief Turner?
I think I did, I don't know.
Okay. Do a fresh here. Chief Turner, well, do I have a second here?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Chief Turner. We'll take focused discussion. Any additional discussion here? Okay. Mr. Holloway?
His motion is good, but when he said put restraint on it, that's just like handcuffing, not allowing you to ask. If you don't ask, you're not going to get it. So how you know you're going to get it if you don't ask?
Wait, can you elaborate a little bit? So I think Mr. Cooper's motion was saying that creation of the 10th position with the understanding that it would stay within the 1.5 million that has been that is stated in the charter.
Yeah, I heard that part.
Okay.
Do we have to use that part, stay within in that limit?
So you take issue with it staying within
I think
it's
we
up
need.
to the board
I
to
think
have
we
the
need.
discussion.
I think we need a 10th person.
Okay, and I think in this motion does create the 10th role.
And,
Yeah, Mr.
and
Cooper.
all I was saying is that it's consistent with our budget obligations under the amendment. The amendment allows us to go ask for anything we feel that we need and requires the Metro Council to fund sufficiently for us to do our duties. I think the intent of the motion is simply to say that we are going to be cognizant of being good stewards of our money.
Well, we're going to be that anyway.
Right, but it doesn't hurt to put it on the record.
Yeah. I think that's Mr. Cooper's point. And I take your point, Mr. Holloway. I think, do you take Mr. Cooper's, or do you have additional comments?
I just have a problem with that part, that restraint within the budget. And I just think we definitely need the 10th person.
Yes, sir.
But like I said, if you don't ask, you're not going to get it.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Okay. With that, all in favor, please say aye. Nays? Abstention? Motion passes. Thank you very much. The last, second to last thing I just want to note and say again here, May 2nd through the 3rd is the NYU Police Community Workshop. And Mr. Campbell Gooch and Dr. Lewis will be attending. Mr. Campbell Gooch, we did meet as an executive committee, share with them. We wanted to ensure that we had at least one member of the executive committee that was present. And then the executive committee discussed the need to have at least one member of our board that represented the police community as well. I did share with the committee. I thought it would be a good idea for us to have some diversity there, also in ensuring that we had both our women and men represented, and also other identities as well. I reached out to both Ms. Marsh and Dr. Lewis, and I believe based on scheduling conflicts and Ms. Marsh and others had, it came down to Dr. Lewis being the best person to represent the board alongside Mr. Campbell Gooch. Bless you. In front of you, however, I just want to make sure that you did get this by email. I want you all to see the here where the grant to permit Mr. Campbell Gooch and Dr. Lewis to attend was adopted by the council, also signed here. If there's any questions about this too, I just wanted to make sure we had the floor to answer them. At the next meeting, both Mr. Campbell Gooch and Dr. Lewis will be prepared to share their insights and what they brought from the meeting. But Ms. Ross.
Okay, I don't have any objection to this at all, but I have noticed that Ms. Lewis has been absent from meetings. And is that a fair representation of someone who does not attend our meetings on a regular basis? And I'm not sure why she has not been at the meetings, but I have no problem other than that. And to make sure that she attends the meeting
Ms. Ross,
and bring the information back.
I think it's a great point. I don't know that, and you all correct me if we have addressed attendance as well in the bylaws, I believe, right? It is, yeah. But I think you raise an important point. As chair, too, it is my job to look into that, too. Mr. Dickerson.
I want to point out that Dr. Lewis's boss passed away, so that's what she's been attending to. She basically had, my understanding is, she's basically got to take on a lot of tasks. And so she regretted not being able to attend, but that was the reason she's not able to attend.
I didn't know.
And that's an oversight on my part. I thought that the chair was copied on the email that she sent, and you were not.
No.
I just forwarded that to you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Sorry.
I'm very sorry. No, it's okay. I didn't. I should have shared that. I knew that Mr. Martinez wouldn't be here as he's graduating from a program tonight. Yeah, I cut you off, Ms. Ross. Were you saying something?
No, it just has not just been this meeting. It's been other meetings, and I just wanted to bring that up because we need representation from everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Mr. Holloway. Yeah, and I'll come back to you, Mr. Dickerson.
The workshop being here in town, correct?
It's in New York.
In New York.
That's why they had to get. That's why they had to get the grant for the travel accommodations for their flights and things like that. Yeah. Yes, Mr. Dickinson.
This is a bit pro forma because council's already approved it, but it might be good for you to go ahead and get a motion to accept the grant and to allow these two individuals to go to NYU.
Sure.
You can have it in the record. Normally, we would get acceptance by the board, but because this was a rush, we didn't find out about it as a board that this was happening until late, and so we found a way to work with finance to get a resolution approved quickly. So we had to do a little out of order, but normally this would be we go before you, then we go before council.
Okay, Ms. Ross.
And that's what I want to say. We need to be more transparent. Even if we got an email that this information was available, we got nothing in advance that someone was attending, who was attending, or anything.
So we did talk about this at the last board meeting. We talked about the it was in my remarks. I shared with the board that NYU had extended the invitation. And I did say that, and I did share too that I didn't know where we were standing on that. But Mr. Dixon is right, he's moved quickly. But I did want to make sure, even things that I don't know if are going to float to the top, that I share here. I do believe, and I don't know that we've shared I think we have shared the minutes of the last executive committee meeting.
No,
we have not. Okay.
No.
Okay, and then there's an error there because that would have helped you know the communication and the discussion, right?
So we're missing stuff.
I hear
that we need to make sure that everybody gets
shared out.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. I agree. Absolutely. Anyone else thoughts or discussion on this? If not, I take Mr. Dickerson's point. We need to have a motion to both receive, even though it's here, to receive the grant funds for Mr. Campbell Gooch, and Dr. Lewis to attend the workshop. Does anyone make the motion? Anyone prepared to make the motion, rather? That's a better way to say it.
I'll move.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. 1 second.
Second.
Mr. Cooper, focused discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nay, abstention, motion carries. Thank you very much. And last but, Ms. Holdren?
I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Chair, I don't know where this fits in, but I do want to, thinking about a process suggestion that responds to Member Ross's concern, that when, particularly the executive committee meets, but the other committees, since we're moving very quickly, and now that we have an executive director, can we commit to, at least an informal rule, that the minutes from, the proposed minutes from the executive committee meeting will be available in 2 business days, so that they can go out to the members, and that gives all members an opportunity to see what issues are being discussed. And then that ties into the process I mentioned earlier, which is now that we have an executive director, you receive that, you see that it's happened within 48 hours, you can make a phone call to the executive director and meet with him, express concerns, and we can start moving more expeditiously if we need to.
Well, I think that's certainly a lot more feasible now that we'll have a team on the field here. It is more than just kind of a body of one. I think that's great. I think that we would also be, I think the suggestion is not just for the executive committee, but also would that go for our committee, our subcommittees as well? I mean,
I was
so-
speaking to the one that I participate in. I try not to make rules for other people,
Okay.
but I think that does make
Swing.
sense.
Okay, all right. I get not wanting to put other people's feet on the fire here, but I do think it would be helpful also to likely hear the outcomes of our other committees.
And I think that because of the way we're set up, it is only the executive committee that would be entertaining action that would
Okay.
lead to action that may be time-bound.
Okay.
If the Rules Committee is thinking about something,
It'll
there's
still
still
come out.
time, because the rules won't change without a formal meeting. But, and properly, it is good for us to be nimble, because there are going to be opportunities and also urgent needs, right?
Yes.
That we need to respond to quickly,
Right.
but we need to establish a system whereby we trust each other to move quickly. Because if we don't trust each other, then we have to plod from posted meeting to posted meeting to posted meeting.
Right.
If we move quickly, though, and we are together in a posted meeting and come up with some agreements to satisfy concerns, then we can move. So that idea of an expedited minutes from the executive committee, particularly talking about something that's coming up that may be timely before the next meeting, to go out within 2 business days.
I think it's
Was-
fair. I think we should, certainly, I look to my secretary and also to Mr. Whedon here, because that would need, I mean, that'd be concerted action here, and partnership here. Mr. Cooper, how feasible do you believe it is? I mean, your thoughts
Well,
there?
You know, I think the key thing here is getting us fully staffed up, since I would be relying on the staff to get those out. But I think it's something we ought to shoot for. Makes perfect sense to me.
Let me ask one question. Would the electronic copy of the minutes be sufficient, or do you also need hard copies here at the meetings?
Electronic is
Electronic copies, okay.
Yep. So with that in mind, then it seems entirely feasible. Mr. Sweeney?
Does it make sense to automatically post the minutes of the board and the executive committee and the committees right to the website?
I think, so I guess we haven't, yeah. Yeah, I think
Particularly
so.
if they're, right, because they haven't been approved, but to
Right.
post them immediately, and that's what I'm
And
going
then everybody
for.
would know where to look, and it'd have a
Exactly.
history of it if they want to look 3 meetings back or whatever else they
Exactly.
can see.
Makes them, yeah,
where we
available.
are.
Yeah, and it goes in the stream of transparency, which we're talking a lot about. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Just click on
Ms.
it.
Hildreth, yes?
And for Mr. Whedon, we do have, this board has a website, is a part of official Metro government. It is up, and that is a practice that we have adopted since even before we were selected. That the mayor's office was, and city council were kind to respond to some requests to stand it up and put all documents on immediately.
Okay.
So that as we continue as a part of our public and civic education to tell our respective publics to look to the website, then we want to be responsive to make sure that we keep the website fully fleshed.
Good.
Thank you. Any additional comments, thoughts here? The only last item here within my chair remarks is just to share, I want to share with the board. So next, our next meeting is May the 22nd, at a location to be determined. I think that's the 4th Wednesday. I am scheduled to be out of town, so I can promise you I will not be present for that meeting. Jamil, I'll make sure, Mr. Campbell-Gooch, I'll make sure we connect ahead of that. But just in full transparency, I want to share that there's a commitment I simply can't change. And so, but I'll make sure that everything that needs to be in place is in place prior to that. And we'll certainly look for those meeting minutes online, too. within 48 hours, too. No, just kidding. All right. So other than that, I want to point to the clock, and I want to say publicly I've made a commitment to Ms. Marsh, and she's probably smiling. She doesn't think I can get this meeting under 2 hours. I can't promise you today, but I might get you the next day. But I do want to go to our COB personnel agenda item next. Before we do that, I want us to point out that we do have kind of two big fish on our agenda here tonight, being that of the Bylaws Committee and then our Rules Committee, and we'll come to that. But I just want us to keep that in mind as we go into this next topic. And I welcome Ms. Hall to the floor here to join us. Hi there.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly won't be someone that's looking to take up much of your time, as we've had extensive conversation about the ongoing staffing and setting up a qualified, diverse department as soon as possible, and we're completely committed to that. As Mr. Whedon alluded to earlier, we were corresponding about staff even before his arrival here. We've already met with Mr. Whedon to really start moving along the process towards the selection of other key positions that we have significantly discussed with the board. Following the last meeting, there has been discussion, and the practice throughout Metro is for an executive director position that reports to a board, the board selects that position, and you have done that effort very, very well, which has yielded this change. The remaining 8 positions that are contemplated in the charter amendment, and any other positions that you add, would be considered civil service. Those follow parameters that are under the civil service rules and policies for the metropolitan government. That is something I manage for the metropolitan government. I technically also report to a commission, which is the Civil Service Commission. Typically, all of the employment decisions made for civil service employees are done by the appointing authority, which is always the department head, which in this case would be Mr. Whedon. I know the board has been interested on a role they can play in helping to offer feedback on the selection of 2 particular positions, which are, I think, your highest priorities next: the assistant director and your senior legal advisor. Mr. Sweeney had brought up a prior point of having the COB select those positions, for which I think there are significant legal challenges within the confine of the civil service rules to do, and a ton of practical reasons why I think it is not a good idea. And there's a reason that while I appreciate the uniqueness of the Community Oversight Board, we are a designed board and commission-driven government. We have 70 boards and commissions, 50 plus departments, and most of which those departments report to one or more boards and commissions. So our recommendation had been that for those positions that we have a member of the COB serve on the interview panel and still allow the appointing authority, who's Mr. Whedon, to make the selection. And then Ms. Hildreth had offered another option for consideration, and then at the last meeting asked that HR work with the legal department to kind of flesh out its viability, which would then allow the COB to effectively be Mr. Whedon's interview panel, and then they could participate in the interview process, and then Mr. Whedon, as the appointing authority, would then solely then make the decision. So we did meet and discuss with legal. That is a more viable option. I think it alleviates most of the, legal challenges and concerns that I had within the confines of the civil service rules. If the board insisted upon doing that, we could find a way under certain conditions to meet that need. It is not still something I would recommend at all. I do recommend the process, and I want you to know in my heart, I have no dog in this hunt. We will be offering the same amount of resources whether we have the board participate fully as a board or whether we support with just one board member. So know that I am offering our suggestions only from the place of I want to meet the board's needs, and I'm looking out for both your interest and the interest of fully staffing a well-qualified staff as soon as possible. So I would love for us to reach agreements today about what the next steps will look like so we can start hiring as soon as possible. As you are well aware, in the interest of time and our March 29th deadline, which we are far past, we had already started to collect and rank candidates, which is a requirement of the civil service rules for both positions. Mr. Whedon has seen those positions. We have well-qualified candidates in both groups that we are ready to interview now. So if the board would allow, as is standard protocol across government, for Mr. Whedon to work with our staff and build an interview panel with members or without, or if there's another alternative that the board would like to consider. When we spoke with Mr. Whedon this afternoon, I think we are pretty confident that we could be interviewing both positions next week and hopefully making offers by the end of the week. Again, those will then compel at least 2-week notices, if not longer, for those candidates. So we're still pushing out some of those. And then we'll start working on the investigator and the community liaison, which we think are also very critical roles for the board and for staffing. So I've offered a lot of feedback, but I'm here at your pleasure.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Mr. Sweeney.
Yes, the bylaws that we'll get to in a minute have 2 alternate proposals for the process of hiring. One of them is hiring by the executive director directly, and the other is a joint process with the board. And the way it's drafted in there, it has the hiring decision and the second alternative being made by the executive director and the board together. But it could be revised easily to just modify it to go with the manner by which Ms. Hildreth proposed. But just for background purposes, just to know that those 2 concepts are both in the bylaws that we're going to get to in a minute.
Thank you. Any additional thoughts or questions? So it seems Ms. Hall is detailed for us 2 opportunities. We certainly do. We need to make a decision tonight. Not making a decision essentially impedes progress, right? And keeps our Mr. Whedon from having the team he needs to be successful. So I welcome thoughts here, Ms. Hildreth.
Thank you. One concern that Ms. Hall did share with me following our last meeting that I do think needs to be articulated here is that the idea that would have all of us present would be a huge hardship on her office and her staff if we did it in our normal meeting times. So if we started at 4 and went until 10 p.m. as we are wont to do, that would not be helpful to them. So I would like to suggest that if we think about doing something like that, we also think about being sacrificially available during normal work hours so that these would be a meeting, a panel that would be scheduled between 8 and 4:30. Is that correct?
I think there really are kind of, based on the feedback from the board and our normal practice, probably 3 options. And I'll kind of try to outline them after our discussion with legal that I think.
Ms. Hall, would you mind just for this portion, could you sit here because I know that our technicians are likely unable to pick up your voice with one of the mics. Thank you.
So our first option would be the traditional option that every other board and commission employs, which is that we work with the appointing authority as Mr. Whedon. We build a diverse interview panel. We, through the civil service rules, interview candidates, and then Mr. Whedon makes a selection. Obviously, that's the most expeditious. We can do that quite quickly. As I mentioned before, that interview panel, which I had offered a few meetings ago, could absolutely include a member of the COB. It only needs to be 1 member. Once we have more than 2 members present, then it becomes a publicly noticed meeting. And I do, for the interest of the candidates in the process, we prefer that it is not open to the public. I think the other option would be Ms. Hildreth's option. When we discussed that with legal, conditions would be we would need to do it during normal business hours. It would be a long day. So just so you know, we are ready to proceed with interview of 6 candidates for assistant director, which I assume would come first. Expect that to be the better part of a business day, especially with a lunch break as well. That process, we believe, because in that process, you would be the interview panel. but Mr. Whedon would solely make the selection because he's the appointing authority. We believe legally you wouldn't be required to have a quorum. We would want everybody present as long as you can be, but we realize that the demands of a workday are different challenges for different people, especially when we're trying to meet the needs of everyone to be present, right? So we think because you wouldn't be deliberating towards the decision, because it'd be Mr. Whedon's decision, that you could come and go as you choose, or stay as long as you needed to stay under that scenario. The only requirement in the civil service rules are going to be that if you ask a question, you will be required to stay for the entire process because you will have to ask that question of every single candidate. So we would propose that it be about a 45-minute interview. They would have to be publicly noticed. We would go through the interview process, and then following the 45-minute interview, then the COB could offer about 10 minutes of open comment and observation about that particular candidate, and then we would close that discussion and then start with the next candidate. And then Mr. Whedon, following that meeting, would then make a selection based on the feedback in the interview process that you all participated in. And then we would do that for both of those positions. I think with Mr. Sweeney's suggestion about the Community Oversight Board playing a role, again, I do think that is legally problematic, but I think procedurally, if you were to do that, we would still have to do it during business hours. And we are prepared to support people on or boards on an executive director level as best we can. But the reality of our office is we have 5 people in recruitment. We have a second executive director that literally dropped in our lap the day after your meeting, and I have another one that will start next week. So we are. It's been pretty crazy lately. And we really want to feverishly work towards building your staff, and that's in addition to all the other needs that are happening throughout Metro. Under that scenario, when we discussed it with legal, we would have to have a quorum because you would be deliberating towards a decision. So in that scenario, you would need to maintain a quorum. The people who ask the questions, you would still have to meet all the other civil service rules requirements. And so the people that ask the questions would have to ask the same questions of each candidate through that process. Yes,
I want to point out that everyone who voted would need to be there for every candidate also. You couldn't be absent from one candidate and then vote. That would be problematic.
Yeah, thank you. Miss Ross.
You already have a day and time that you plan to do it next week?
Nope. I mean, so just know that we are trying to work as quickly and as appropriately as we need to. So we have planned, and I want you to know this about HR. We would do this for but I want you to know how high a priority your staffing is. We have tried to plan for every contingency so that as soon as we leave this meeting, after reaching an agreement with you guys, we hit the ground running tomorrow morning. Gotcha. So we've already discussed internally what those different options could look like. We've already discussed those with Mr. Whedon. We are also trying to meet the spirit of what the citizens have asked for overwhelmingly, and we are past that date. And knowing that we have a normal process that works very well. And again, my concern is later having a candidate, when you participate fully in the process, that could put something in their back pocket so that when Mr. Whedon does offer appropriate discipline, corrective action, or possibly termination, they could conveniently pull that card out and say, but are you really my appointing authority? And I'm really less concerned about the actual liability or the financial liability that could pose. I am more concerned about the havoc that could wreak on the board itself and on its staff, because I believe it could offer a lot of collateral damage and hurt feelings. Again, my interest is only for you and the staff being well qualified and staffed as quickly as possible, and to mitigate any kind of challenges you may have doing so.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
Yeah, I completely agree. I definitely want to be reinforcing Mr. Whedon with whatever actions we take. But I do have one question. I don't know if you can kind of give us insight. Is if the panel was not constructed of us, right? How would you go about selecting community members in order to represent the community on the panel?
I could probably meet that a number of different ways. I don't envision a very big panel. Again, these aren't, this isn't considering an executive director role. So I really look for probably a smaller panel of 3. Mr. Whedon would obviously be part of that panel. We could either, if there were suggested community members that that you offer to us, we like to do a well-balanced approach, right? So if I have a representative from NOAA or a certain particular part of town, I would want to pick a different one from a different part of town or organization.
Right.
But frankly, if we thought that community members from the COB actually serve on the interview panel, we could have both of those, and you would kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
And I want to open that up for the board. I know people on this board know a lot of valuable community members who do a lot of valuable work, and maybe if we all can't be there, maybe we can suggest to HR certain organizations and figure out a way where we can be there indirectly. You know what I'm saying? Where we can put people on the board that have our full confidence behind them.
Mr. Campbell-Goose, you have a motion, or because it seems we have now more than 2 options in front of us. But what I'm interested to hear is, does anyone feel confident enough about one of these options that you'd like to make a motion that this is the way we proceed? Do we have an idea that perhaps based on everything we're considering here, that we can have 1 member of the board represented on the interview panel and then sending in representatives of the community? I just want to hear where folks stand. And thank you, Mr. Sweeney.
Well, I've been convinced that the concept of having the board be part of the appointing authority decision is impractical. I don't think that it's illegal. I do think that it's impractical. Just because of the time constraints and everybody having to be there and everybody having to ask the questions throughout the whole day and all like that. Okay? On the other hand, for the last several months now, we've invested a lot of time in order to try to construct what we envision this board should be like. Very community-centric in our approach the whole time. And we're fortunate that Mr. Whedon has come and joined us, but he hasn't participated in that. Okay? And he's new or renewed to Nashville. Okay? And if we were to fully support Mr. Whedon but let him make the decision totally on his own, a lot of what we've done and collected, and specifically what we've learned in the interviews in the last process, we're told we can't use, we can't pass on to him. That's not information we can have available to him. And I think that's a big loss, and I think that's a big mistake. And so I think the alternative of having as many board members present as possible, so to go with Ms. Hilda's very, very wise proposal, to have as many people present as possible, and to be able to caucus with Mr. Whedon, but let Mr. Whedon make the hiring decision, is the way to go. And therefore, I would move that that's the alternative that we consider.
What about order before Ms. Ross, Mr. Dickerson? Do you have
I want to make up
clarification?
One point, too, about Ms. Hilder's point, or her proposal. I think when Ms. Hall and I had talked, we agreed that at the conclusion of all the interviews, after the boards had time to speak at that conclusion, at that point, we would ask that you don't contact Mr. Whedon, because you might create a situation where if you say, hey, I want person A, and another board member says, I want person B, and he selects A or B, it'll look like he's favoring one board member or another.
That's true. That's true.
And that was part of our design when we were talking through the logistics of how Ms. Hilder's proposal would work, is offering that public comment period so that everybody can collaborate without creating, I'm also concerned about comments happening after the fact to Mr. Whedon, not only from the liability standpoint that Mr. Dickerson's talking about, but it doesn't meet the spirit of the transparency that I think the board wants to see. And I want Mr. Whedon to feel comfortable with that selection. I want you all to feel comfortable, but this is the person that will be working day in, day out with Mr. Whedon.
Right.
So that's part of the reason why we said the public comments, and then when the interviews and public comments are closed for that meeting, that Mr. Whedon will then go off and make the selection and let us know, and then we'll work through that process.
Thank you. Ms. Ross and Chief Turner.
I just want to know possibly how many board members will be available to spend that time. before we start
Yep.
making suggestions.
Well, that's the first position. The second position, expect a half a day. Full
I'm
day.
saying how many board members could give.
Right.
Give that
But
time.
since you're contemplating it for two positions, just know for the assistant director, it'd be a full day.
Mhm.
For the legal, senior legal advisor, we are expecting at least half a day. Just so that people know what the time commitments would be.
I think, Ms. Ross, I take your point. I think without knowing the day, and obviously you're here, for me, I do have a full-time job during the day, so it'd be rather difficult. I certainly, with a bit of advance notice, would try to make it happen, though. And so, in next week, too, if it was, Wednesday or Thursday, or Friday of next week, Dr. Lewis and Mr. Campbell Gooch would not be able to be in attendance. May 1st, I'm potentially out of town myself. And so I can tell you just, by my travel schedule, I try to travel on weeks when I know we're not doing COB work. So that's at least 2 or 3 people who at the end of next week would not be available. I don't know if anyone else feels. And I know Chief Turner, you're next up. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so.
How many candidates do we have for the executive assistant, executive director?
Of the most highly qualified that we reviewed with Mr. Whedon, we are prepared to interview 6
6.
that look really strong.
Okay. Would it be possible for us to look at their information?
If you participate in the process, absolutely, for sure. Yes, and I don't see why we possibly couldn't share it. We need you to keep it confidential, even if we did the traditional Metro way of hiring. I don't see anything that would preclude that. It's just that the civil service rules really are much more restrictive about what can be considered in the hiring and selection of. So if you guys are looking at this information and not participating in the interview process, then it's going to be hard for Mr. Whedon to consider that information. I understand it's not me. It's the confines of the civil service rules. I'm really trying to work with them.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But I think it's important also that Mr. Whedon have an enormous amount of input into who he would like as an assistant executive director, since he's going to be working hand in hand with this person. And if you have someone that you're not able to work with, it's going to make the process a lot more difficult. So I just think that he needs to have an awful lot of input, and whomever is going to be chosen as the assistant executive director. So I would not mind participating in the interview process, but also I would need to know the date, because I have some things that I'm going to be obligated to do out of town in the next couple of weeks too.
So we would gauge probably availability tomorrow with the Community Oversight Board. Again, I think the inherent challenges of just going past the traditional metro route is that it will delay the process by which we can actually get this done. I think that's the only timing drawback, which I think we're all pretty sensitive to. I will say that when we met with Mr. Whedon, my perception is that he had a shared commitment to what I feel like I heard at the last board meeting with regard to balancing the strengths of his executive team. I felt like that was a theme I really heard from the Community Oversight Board, that while Mr. Whedon brought his set of strengths, that we saw some other interesting strengths from other candidates. Know that the assistant director, only 2 of the people who applied for the executive director have applied for the assistant director. Mr. Fennell has already secured employment in Seattle, and our last candidate chose not to apply. So these 6, 4 you've never seen before. But I felt like Mr. Whedon had a shared commitment to, and I'll certainly let him speak for himself, but to balancing out the strengths of the executive team to really round out all of the needs, I think, of what the Community Oversight Board is trying to achieve.
That's absolutely true. I think the group of candidates that we have would be an excellent supplement to my skill set, and I think we have a very diverse group of candidates. So I think it would be a positive addition to have either one of those 6 or the one for the legal position. I think like to get that filled as soon as possible, and that's the most important thing. We want a well-rounded group of people committed to the same cause, and of course you have to be able to work together, so we have to have that rapport to be able to work together. And I think that we can make that decision and bring those people on as soon as possible. That's what I'm hoping to do.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell Gooch and Mr. Cooper.
I mean, that's what I was going to ask, if Mr. Whedon just kind of inform us on what he's hearing off the top of his head as far as like, what could this board do to best empower him to make the best decision for the community oversight board and the executive and the assistant executive positions. So that's just what I wanted to know, Mr. Whedon. What we looking like as far as timetable, what's ideal for you to get it up and running, and how do you think we can help you create this staff?
Well, as Ms. Hall said, with the group of candidates that we have, if we could do the interviewing next week, I'm sure that we could be staffed with both of these positions that we look at the materials for within the next 2 weeks. It's a very good group of candidates. The next position that we're going to fill will be the investigator position, and we have received materials for that position, or those positions, the 3 of them. So we'll interview, hopefully the group of people that we interview, we'll be able to select 3 of them from that total group, and that will be filled rather quickly. So ultimately, we could be more than half staffed by the end of May, or before the end of May, ideally.
Thank you. I want to pause here and let me just, I'm coming to Mr. Cooper. I want us to be thoughtful of the time. I also just want I want us to think about, and I say focused discussion a lot, but let's make sure we're having focused discussion. I believe that there's a solution here and we're within arm's reach.
Yes.
Let's reach out and grab it, right? And so with that, Mr. Cooper.
Sure. I want to speak in favor of the traditional method here for several reasons. One, I think that this is becoming too complex of a process to go beyond that. I think that we hired Mr. Whedon because specifically of his experience as an administrator of just this sort of body, and that he has, through that experience, the ability to choose wisely. I would say we will have 1 member of the board who will be present for the interviews under the traditional method, who can help convey the knowledge we have gained from setting up this board and from the interviews we've had before. I think, and I would encourage other board members, as Mr. Whedon is reaching out to us, to convey in a general sense just what we are looking for. Because even if we were in an interview, we would not be obviously telling him what to do in making that selection. So I'd say, in the interest of getting this done promptly, that the traditional method gives us the opportunity to have our input, and yet will allow Mr. Whedon to make the choice of the person that he is going to be relying on and working most closely with. And to do this on an expeditious basis. So that's why I think the traditional method would be the best way to go forward.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. In fact, and I'm happy to go with Mr. Holloway there. I wanted to pause. I thought that you were making a motion there. That's why I was pausing here. Mr. Holloway.
Not if, but when you select a person to assist him down the road somewhere, and that person is not good to work with, what kind of process do we have removing that person? Or who will make that decision?
Mr. Whedon.
Mr. Whedon.
He's the appointing authority under civil service, Mr. Whedon.
Ms. Ross.
I make a motion that we go with the traditional method, with 1 board member sitting on the committee.
I'll second the motion.
Second, focused discussion. Mr. Sweeney.
Do I need to withdraw my motion for that purpose? Because my motion is still pending, but I'm willing to withdraw it.
It would fail for lack of a second, as of now.
Okay.
Focused discussion. Mr. Campbell Gooch.
I would still like to inform, I would still like to maybe come up with a list of organizations we would like to be represented on the hiring panel.
Okay. So so that's something that we can incorporate after the fact, or should we add this to the original motion here to make sure that it is active?
I can go back.
Do you accept the friendly amendment?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Friendly amendment, okay.
We'll incorporate that into the original.
Incorporate,
Mhm.
perfect, okay, fantastic. Any additional comments?
motion.
And what is the?
Oh, we need
friendly
a-
amendment?
The friendly amendment made by Mr. Campbell Gooch.
Is that we come up with a list of organizations that we want to be represented on the hiring panel.
And can I just make a point of
Within-
clarification?
Yeah, because it's going to be a small number.
It's gonna be a small
It's
number.
gonna be 3.
And just so you know, typically how we would do any interview panel,
Mhm.
I'm not looking for more than 3. Mr. Whedon is already 1. A board member is 2. Typically, we would have possibly another Metro member, kind of a similarly situated, because you need somebody who understands organizationally, are they gonna be able, I mean, you all are a department.
Yes.
You are significantly a department. So typically, we would have a balanced approach, and obviously, racial, gender, socioeconomic considerations come standard with all of those. So but I would love to work with that, especially if I'm appreciative of what you're proposing,
Yeah.
I guess, but I just don't know if we're gonna be able to accommodate that many bodies.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say with that new information, I just withdraw my friendly amendment.
Okay.
I don't know.
It sounds like it makes it more complex.
I don't know how a chair makes a friendly amendment here, but I do think there's an opportunity here. We do have members of our board. We are here because of the community, right? And so there's an opportunity, I believe, for us to use that space there as well.
I would respectfully request, and you don't even have to make it part of your motion because it would be my preference anyway, because I do like Mr. Campbell Gooch's suggestion that the 2 COB members, especially since I've heard this theme throughout the COB from its inception, is that we have 2 community members that serve as one on one and one on the other, but they are community members of the COB that
Right.
serve on those interview panels.
Fantastic. Okay, and so we're making that friendly amendment.
Are you okay with that?
Ms.
Yes.
Ross, if that's okay
That's
with you.
fine.
Does anyone
Yeah,
second?
also.
Mr. Cooper seconds. Focus discussion. All in favor, please say aye. Nays? Abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Now, I think it would be important, let's identify those 2 members of the board. And keep in mind, I know Mr. Martinez is not here for a worthy reason, but may have some interest here, but we want to move things along here as well. I know that hasn't been scheduling yet, but let me just open up. Is there anyone that has interest or the capacity or to stand in and serve as one of those 2 spaces?
I can take off a full day, so
Okay.
if nobody else wants to do a full day, I can do a full day.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
I can as well.
Mr. Campbell Gooch.
I know my availability next week is limited, but
Yeah,
Depending on the day.
depending on the day of the week, right?
Are you comfortable in either one of the panels? Because then we can build around your availability about which one serves on which.
Yes, ma'am.
You okay with that? We
Okay.
can just work directly with you starting tomorrow.
Fantastic. With that in mind, can I hear a motion? Anyone please make a motion to have Mr. Campbell Gooch and Ms. Ross serve as our 2 representatives on the interview panel.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Hildreth. 1 second. 1 second. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Focus discussion. Right? Those in favor, please say aye. Nay. Abstention. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Hall. Thank you to all of HR. And thank you, Ms. Ross and Mr. Campbell Gooch, for standing up again and leading us in this space, in this respect.
Much appreciative.
Yeah, absolutely. Ms. Hall, anything else, though, on that end? Okay, fantastic.
We are ready to run.
Great.
We are
Great.
very excited to get you all staff and get Mr. Whedon as acclimated as we can. So
Fantastic.
We appreciate it.
We're excited, too. Mr. Sweeney.
Just one question as to further than hiring down the road. Because, as I understand it, this decision then means that Mr. Whedon has the authority to hire everyone. And from the comments that he made just a moment ago of saying having all the investigators by the end of May, I'm not sure, in light of where we are and the demand for what we're going to do, that makes sense to hire everybody all at one time, as distinguished from hiring an investigator and hiring a research person, or hiring 2 investigators and 1 research, but not yet hire some of the others, and to kind of roll it out as we develop a need, because there's still a lot that's going to have to get done to be operational, and I don't think that it would be good for us to have a lot of people that we don't have the immediate need to keep them busy.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Ms. Hildren.
Thank you. I would just like to suggest that we are at the point now where we're functioning like a normal board, and that it is the right role and responsibility of the executive director to determine how to stand up the organization to which he's been charged. So I think that we do well when we stay clearly within our bounds of governance roles, and not to interfere with the daily operations of the board. And so with that said, I stand by my comfort and support in our election and appointment of Mr. Whedon as our executive director. He has the charge, he hears the will, he has Amendment 1, and as long as it stays within the budget, I'm not concerned.
Mr. Sweeney.
I think we're still in an organizational stage, so I think this is very much a board function, and we're trying to develop the budget and figure out how we best husband the 1.5 million, and to show everybody that we're responsible in the process that we're going through. So I do very, very much agree that it's Mr. Whedon's responsibility to run the department, and that's why we want him, and that's why we have faith in him to hire him to do it. But I think at this point, it's still a judgment of the board as far as how we get up and going, and how we best show to the community what we're going to do and how we're going to be responsible with what's been given to the board and how it's going to roll out. So I don't think that's an overstretch of the board responsibility, and I don't think that's interfering with operations. And I think at this point, at least, it's worth discussing, how we want to do that, or to suggest to Mr. Whedon what might be steps and stages.
Well, let me just add that the COB is an investigative agency. It's dissimilar from the oversight agencies in Memphis or Knoxville, which are auditing agencies. For an investigative agencies, the most important personnel to have are investigators. We need to have investigators on staff should any need for them arise, which can happen at any moment. So that's most important. Those positions need to be filled, whether it's 1, 2, or 3, we need to be able to fill those positions as soon as possible, because there are going to be people on the ground doing the investigations. Of course, the assistant director position is very important, and the legal position is very important. That's why I said the 2 research assistant positions, there's some buffer there. I think if we need buffer with a budget, we have time to hire those and to see whether they should be full-time or less than full-time, 100%. But as an investigative agency, as an investigative body, which is COB is, we need to have those investigative positions filled quickly.
Ms. Hildren?
I kind of agree with Mr. Sweeney that we spent so much time on rules and procedures in the last couple of weeks, and if we're going through this, we can answer some of the questions in terms of what we need to do moving forward. That we can move through the rules and policies.
The bylaws there? Okay.
Can we just say procedurally, as that conversation, because obviously we have other hiring priorities that will come first. As you engage that discussion with Mr. Eden, we can administratively accommodate either. So I guess that's the best part. So as
That is
you work with your executive director, we can administratively accommodate those needs. We could use that list over a period of time if we decide to go after one or two right now, or decide to go after all three. The only challenge there is making sure you keep candidates interested. So you probably don't want to go with too much delay, but I want you to know, as you all, I know you need to move on to big business, but as you guys, that conversation continues, and Mr. Whedon needs us to meet that demand, he can just communicate it to us, and we are happy to accommodate it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Hall.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to move forward. If there's not any additional comments, we can move forward. I'd like to ask probably Ms. Hall and Mr. Dickerson to switch seats here in a moment, and welcome Mr. Dickerson to the space. Mr. Sweeney and also Mr. Martinez have worked tirelessly, and you all let me know if I'm missing anyone else outside of our regular meetings, but to also have their committee meetings as well. I did state bylaws and then rules, but if you believe it could be more helpful in the flow of the discussion to do it another way, I'm open to that as well. So I'll open with Mr. Dickerson, who led us, I think, very well in the first time out.
I will say Mr. Campbell Gooch is also on our bylaws.
Oh, then I knew I was missing someone. Apologies, sir. Mr. Campbell Gooch as well. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to point out that we have, I think the place we're in, we had an original, we did this last month, we went over a large part of the bylaws. These red line edits that you see are changes from last month, based on incorporating the board suggestions, also incorporating some additions from the bylaws committee. So what I would like to do is I'd like to go through them just by the red lines. However, being cognizant that Mr. Whedon may want to have some input on something that's not redlined, I just ask you, sir, if you have anything that you'd like to talk about, that you raise that as we go along, and we're happy to go back to it and look at that if that works for you.
That's fine.
Okay. All right, so if we'll start with Article 1, you see there's a couple typo issues there. We added in the word bylaws, added a comma after the section. And again, the last time we did this, if anyone has any issues, raise your hand, we'll come back to it. Otherwise, as I go through them, if no one says anything, we'll assume that's good for purposes of voting down the road if you all choose to go there.
Just in reading this, I wondered, I'm not sure it's required, but whether it would be a good idea to add a sentence to Article 1 to make clear that we are not doing anything in these bylaws that restricts the authority granted to us under the charter. Just that someone not come back to us down the road and say, well, yes, but your charter provision says that, but you limited that in your bylaws. And I would propose something along the lines of nothing in these bylaws is intended or shall operate to limit the authority granted to the board by the charter or other law.
Can you read that one more time?
Sure. Here, I'll give it to you.
Okay, so that'll be the new second sentence to Article 1.
Assuming no one has an objection to that.
Okay, good. Article 2 is the board's mission. Mr. Sweeney drafted this language, but I'll go ahead and read it out loud for everybody. The mission of the board is to provide an accessible, respectful, independent, and effective forum for community participation in the investigation and resolution of complaints of Metropolitan Nashville Police Department, MNPD, misconduct, to examine and issue policy recommendations regarding local law enforcement policies and practices, to encourage open and constructive communication and cooperation between local law enforcement and Metro's residents, and to protect civilians' rights and promote professionalism and best practices in the MNPD, enhancing community police relations and creating a safer Nashville. Okay. Article 3, in accordance with the board's request, we added a definitions section. We added, and I won't read those, I'll let you all see those, but we added definitions for board, council, director, MNPD, MNPD misconduct or misconduct, police advisory report,
Policy.
policy
Policy,
advisory
yeah.
report, sorry, and resolution report. So, does anyone have any questions about that? That's a new section, so I want to make sure to give pause to everybody to review that if you want. Okay. Also, by adding in a new article, we moved all the article numbers down, so you'll notice a change in the article numbers. So, because in new Article 4 now, and I'm just going to, when I say article, it'll be the new changed article. Article 4, we capitalize resolution report because that's now a defined term in the definition.
Could I make a suggestion? Since we have defined terms now, wonder if it makes sense as within the rest of the bylaws to use a defined term, to underline it, just to make it clear that that's a defined term, so that the reader can go back to the definitions to see
Okay, I think that makes sense.
what it means.
Okay, and so now moving on to subsection G of Article 4, you see that we added receive public comment and conduct community forums. Okay, this is, okay, in number J, letter J, this was based on, the reason we put a note here is because it was kind of based on our discussion at the earlier part of the meeting. Now we'll go ahead and say that that's what the language will be. It'll be the executive director who will appoint, employ, and discharge. Okay, and then capitalize resolution reports, its staff, section L, that's a typo issue. So Article 5, this is more of an issue related to the pending legislation for the state. Questions about whether or not there's a limitation based on demographics may affect Article 5 as it's currently drafted. Right now, Article 5 is in a place where it's just, this is essentially repeating what's in Amendment 1. So it's one of those things to be cognizant that once, if indeed that state legislation passes, this will be something that we'll have to look at. So, yeah, so the plan is, I believe, and Mr. Sweeney can correct me if I'm wrong, to leave it in there, and then it's just something to be aware of down the road you might have to look at.
Thank you.
Section 2 of Article 5, we just added initial because obviously this will apply to the first set, to the first board, you all, to clarify that. We changed the training in Section 5 of Article 5, just saying that within 6 months of appointment, each board member shall complete orientation training as specified by the board in its rules. So more rules to come on that.
I would point out we're already 2 months into that 6-month period here, in terms of the pretty lengthy list of training that we have in the rules. So we better get cracking.
The Rules Committee has not discussed any of that training yet that's in the rules. So on the rules section, there's still a lot more to be done. I mean, but you know, we're not proposing that these bylaws be adopted tonight. Okay, because we still want to work with the rules, and in order to make sure that the rules and the bylaws will mesh. And there needs, before we're going to present this back, we're going to have another meeting of the Rules Committee. We're going to have then a joint meeting of Rules and Bylaws Committee and make sure everything meshes. And then we will bring it back at the next meeting for the vote of the board. That's kind of the timing issue.
Which all makes sense, but it's 6 months of appointment, not 6 months of adoption of the bylaws.
I understand. We just figured 6 months sounded a long time for initial training.
Yeah. No, I think it's an appropriate amount. It's just that our clock is ticking.
And that may just mean that the executive committee and with the help of Mr. Whedon and staff, we make that a priority that we move a bit swiftly with, right? But I take, but I take both points there, Mr. Dickerson.
And remember also that right now the bylaws, once they're adopted, you can change by majority vote, so it's a little bit easier to change too if something gets to where you feel like you're coming up against that deadline.
Could I just add something quickly? Back to that topic, training is one of the points that we'll be discussing with the Metropolitan Police Department on the May 1st meeting, so maybe we can give you a good ballpark figure of when that date might happen for that type of training.
Mr. Dixon.
Okay, so
Thank you. The orientation training, however, does probably contemplate things other than that which we would learn from the police department, is that correct?
Yeah.
Or would that be how other COB operate, or what our opportunities are and ethics are to be aspirational more than the status quo, so that this would not be limited to that which is provided or conducted in conjunction with the police department, is that correct?
There are two things in the ordinance that are specified training. And so it's probable that we would suggest that orientation training are those two things that are in the statute, one of which is the police department. The other one is probably the training that we're all going through next month. Okay, so we will have done half of our orientation training probably next month.
Thank you for that clarification.
And then we have 4 or so other things that we think might be appropriate for our training.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Holloway?
Like I said, this is first time this board exists, and we're setting the groundwork. So the next board that come along won't have to go through this whole process, you know.
Yes, sir.
So all they gotta do is just follow direction.
Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Mr. Dixon?
okay, Article 5, Section 6. This is Mr. Sweeney and my perennial argument, but one of us, my take is that if you put shall in there, that it's kind of an obligation that the board would have to comply with. That it shouldn't necessarily be an obligation, but he wants to have may, I want to have shall. I'm willing to.
No, the other way around.
Oh yeah,
Unless you switch positions.
No. Sorry.
Just say I accept.
I want to have may. I want to have may. He wants to have shall. I'm willing to go ahead and drop that. We'll just have it as may because it's
You mean shall?
shall. I'm gonna get it right
Good
eventually.
try.
Right now, I'm trying to switch it up. Yeah, so we'll have it as shall, and then your legal advisor will be the one to have to deal with that. Okay, so Article 6, nothing's changed.
Let me,
Article,
if I could,
sure.
so that we don't have to amend the bylaws, should we move from Parkway Towers if they raise our rent or something? Could we say the office of the board will be located at 404 James Robertson Parkway, Nashville, Tennessee 37219, or such other location as the board may approve?
Sure. Article 6.
Okay, let's make that change. Article 7, go down here to Section 4, talks about the term of office. It just talks about how term of office, this is for board officers. So officers of the board serve for 1 year from election until their successors are elected, except for the first board officers, which you all agreed to serve a term of 6 months. And we just put an end date of August 31st, 2019.
Can y'all see that date?
Nothing in here about not being reappointed.
That's right. That's
I got a
right.
calendar. See you in September.
Okay, Article 8, down at the subsection H. Everybody agreed to strike that because it's covered later on in the bylaws. That's the only reason that's stricken. Section 4, nominating committee. June 22nd of each calendar year was chosen as the deadline that they'll begin their deliberations. And it just added, for clarification purposes, factors as applicable to potential nominees. Okay, the next one is Article 9. Mr. Sweeney and I discussed as we were going through that earlier discussion, and we're going to go with the first paragraph, and so you can strike the second paragraph that begins with the board as the appointing authority. You can strike that part, and then there's also going to be a line, the second line of the first paragraph. The very last word in that line is in, so you're going to strike from the word in. So you're going to strike the words in consultation with and with the written consent of the executive committee. You strike that entire portion of that sentence. So the new personnel first paragraph will read this way. It will say,
The board shall have the authority to hire, employ, and terminate the executive director. The executive director shall have the authority to hire and terminate all other employees of the board.
What is our style on this? Are we calling the executive director, or just director?
Director, I think it's a defined term.
I do too.
Should be director throughout.
Director.
And we'll make that's a good point. We'll go ahead and make everything consistent with the definitions to make sure.
Right.
All right, bad. Okay. All right, then. Okay. Article 11. We have a new, Mr. Sweeney proposed a new Article 11, community education involvement and public comment, and I'll just go ahead and read that quickly. As addressed more specifically in its rules, the board will regularly provide a time for public comment at its meetings, although not necessarily at every meeting. The board will hold its meeting in public buildings throughout the county. Its members and staff will attend community meetings to discuss and receive information about the COB, its purpose and operation, and concerns about law enforcement generally. The board will hold open public forums in the community to solicit and share information and concerns.
Question. The term public buildings, do we mean metro properties? Should that be a defined term? What constitutes public building?
We can look at that.
Yes. Mr. Campbell Gooch.
So we also mentioned accessibility, like accessible to the general public as well.
Okay. Why that? Anything else on that one? Now we're in Article 12. We just add release of its resolution report. Again, that's a defined term. Article 13.
Right. Can we go back to Article 12? If the COB receives a public records request for information related to an investigation.
If who?
I'm sorry?
If who?
If the board receives a public records request for information related to an investigation, is that information public record?
I think that's an issue that we're going to have to consider, and we'll be able to post an opinion about that. But right now, my opinion would be that it is.
Knoxville does not consider theirs to be until the investigation is completed.
Because if it is a public records request, then the staff person would have the option of either obeying the law or obeying our bylaws, which would prohibit them from releasing any information related to an investigation.
We have to wait to
where in particular?
Well, board members and board staff shall not release to any person or group any information regarding those investigations. If they get a public records request and it's enforceable under state law, they would have to release that information.
I mean, that's a good question too for Mr. Whedon, as far as how do you maintain the effectiveness and the propriety of an investigation if information is being released to people without some types of restrictions.
It's going to be kind of difficult. I may have to rely on some legal counsel.
It's going to be an issue of state law. I would say one way we could deal with it without having to take a position is just say, comma, subject to state law requirements.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me go to Mr. Holloway first and then Chief Turner.
When you're doing our own investigation, depending on the nature of it, a lot of the information is not going to be at central records. The person that investigating it will probably have access to it have to go through some kind of procedure to get that information. And it would be good that when we do meet with the chief of police, we can ask that question and see if we can get some common ground on it.
Chief Turner.
My question is, if there is a request under the Public Records Law, will the board or will Mr. Wheaton's staff be obligated to release that information during the process of the investigation or at the conclusion of the investigation?
I think there's different, if I may speak, there's some different views on that. Obviously, Knoxville looks at it one way. I think OPA looks at it the same way, that they don't have to release information until the conclusion of their investigation. So I think there's probably some good authority, certainly for you to rely on, saying that other boards and groups have concluded that they don't have to do this. But it's going to be something, it's going to definitely be an issue that your executive director will have to tackle along with legal counsel.
And I think that during the process of an investigation, there's also a possibility that the results of that investigation may change.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're releasing the information during the investigative process, then it's going to, I guess, convolute the outcome of the final investigation.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think that once the investigation is concluded, and if there's a request for information, then, yeah, obviously, we're obligated to release it, but not during the investigation.
I think from a policy perspective, this is absolutely right. We want to maintain our investigations confidential. The question is whether state law allows us to do that. And that's what Mr. Whedon needs to look into.
This was in here, we have to wait on to see what's going to be approved too.
Yeah, it may well be affected by that new statute. At least if we get confidential information from the police department pursuant to memorandum of understanding, if that information is confidential, then it would stay confidential with us, as I understand the new statute.
But if we did an interview on our own,
I agree, it's a great question.
It would be public record.
Anything else? Mr. Dickerson.
Okay. And so we'll add in at the end of that second to last sentence, consistent with the requirements of state law, if that works for everyone. Article 13, again, we said February 1st for a public report of the activities.
That date was specifically selected because of the new statute, in order to make our reports consistent with whatever report we have to do there.
And we just added a provision about additional information required by the Tennessee Code. Article 14, looks like subsection D is the next one. Mr. Cooper, you had mentioned that there's no functional difference between a called meeting. They're all subject to Tennessee Open Meetings Act, so we removed the called. We also put down, because the Metro Charter and Code have different open meetings requirements than the Tennessee Open Meetings Act, so we added that. Section 2. All agendas for meetings when public comment will be received shall state the amount of time reserved for that purpose and the amount of time allotted to each speaker. Again, this will come about, there'll be more specific parts in the rules. This is just the part for the bylaws. It's very generic.
Question?
Sure.
On C and D, two things. First, on C, can we get rid of the 1 in front of Robert's Rules of Order, since there is no 2? And what is meant by the last sentence of each of C and D? Vote on any such suspension shall be taken by yes, no, and abstention and entered in the minutes of the meeting. Does that mean we're requiring a roll call vote? Because otherwise, every vote we take is ayes, noes, and abstentions.
I'm not sure.
No, the only thing I remember we changed there is took a yeas, nays, and put yes and no.
Yeah.
But I don't remember.
Well, how about there may be something that we will remember why that was in there. We'll come back. We'll come back with that. I'll note in the next red line that the board sees that this was an issue we were coming back for. But otherwise, we'll strike it if we can't.
We haven't looked at that in a while.
Okay, new section E, and this is sort of the practice of the board, and frankly, it's very, most boards and commissions end up going back and forth on their agenda. This just allows the board chair to have discretion to change the order. Sometimes you'll have someone who has to leave, so you're going to lose your quorum, so you want to vote early. That's a good opportunity. So you don't have, the Roberts Rules defaults to 2/3 majority, so this just makes it a little bit easier. We're going to spell the word resolution right in section 5. But that's, again, the defined term. Change that. And then Article 19. This is simply if there's a conflict about an interpretation within these bylaws, who has the authority to resolve that conflict. And so we changed it to all such questions shall be referred to the chair for resolution with veto of that decision only by unanimous rejection of all remaining board members present. So the idea being that if you interpret, if there becomes a conflict as to how to interpret the bylaws and you interpret A and everybody else says it should be B, it takes everyone to reject that for it to be B.
Okay. Ms. Hildreth and then Mr. Cooper.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to Article 15 for a moment. And it's just housekeeping after spelling out National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. Do you want to put parens Nicole there?
Good idea.
And does law needs to be underlined, capitalized there? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper.
While I have the utmost confidence in our board chair, unanimous is an awfully high standard to set for overriding. Generally, something like that tends to be 2/3 or 3/4. Why unanimous?
I think if I may, I think it's the idea is that we want the chair to have a lot of authority in that area, and only because there may be some things that come up in bylaws, you don't want to make an issue where every time there's a question about the bylaws that you're having a debate about the interpretation.
Agreed, which is why we went away from majority. But I guess still coming back to unanimous, it's not a big point. I'm happy to go with it. It just seemed a little strict.
Strong chair position.
Yeah.
Anybody have any thoughts on that? They want to.
If no one else is concerned, I'm not concerned.
Okay. I think that's it.
And with our discussion about may and shall and about who's going to hire and all, that resolves all of the internal issues that we had in the drafting of the bylaws. So subject to the bylaws committee looking at this again and the rules committee going through this and making sure that we feel a comfort that everything that needs to be addressed in the bylaws is addressed in the bylaws and is consistent with what we anticipate in the rules, then we would be ready at the next meeting to propose.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Sweeney, Mr. Dickerson. I just want to pause and make sure I'm clear here. So we are prepared to move forward with the rules. I want to make sure that there would be in good fashion. I know we've taken some time to go through them, receive them ahead of time, in consideration of the time also, and not just with the remaining hour, but we do, of course, need to be out of this building no later than the 7 o'clock space too. Mr. Sweeney?
We don't, the Rules Committee doesn't feel a need for input from the board at this point, but it's invited, and Mr. Whedon hasn't had a chance to weigh in on these, and he's going to have, the way that we approached these rules was, this is an on-the-ground implementation, standard operating procedure sort of document, and that we could get it started, but we couldn't finish it.
Correct.
Okay? So we've started pulling it together as a place to start, a place to talk, and therefore it's probably the best use of time to wait and let Mr. Whedon work through it, and then for the Rules Committee to meet with him and see how we can best support him in that process. Or if he just says, you know what, guys, it's going to make a whole lot more sense for me to just take it and do the next draft and then share it with you. Whatever. So the only thing that I would suggest here from a policy standpoint is to talk about a couple provisions that the Executive Committee asked us to address. That has to do with the issues of public engagement, public comment, and talk through those to get a sense whether the board thinks we're moving in the right direction or the wrong direction, and so that we can govern ourselves in working with Mr. Whedon in that regard.
Fantastic, yeah. Please
Okay,
lead
so
the way.
we would suggest looking first at 2D. And section D has to do with the complaints and investigations, and it takes us all the way up through the end product of the staff, which would be a resolution report. So it takes from complaints on the front end all the way to a resolution report that would then be presented to the board to resolve. So the public comment issue that goes with that is in D1 and D2, which will be the manner in which the board will consider resolution reports. So the resolution report will come to us as a complete packet. You will have all the investigation that's done, it will have the backup information, it will have a recommendation from the executive director, and then it will be presented to us to act upon. The question is, what process do we want to use to act upon it? And from looking at various sources, we identified various ways. Number one is, it's all paper, okay? It comes to us in the report, we meet, we might have different kind of categories of things that can get a summary review versus an extended review, but it all comes on the paper, and then the board makes a decision, and we're done. Another alternative is that in all situations, the parties who are involved with the particular matter would have a right to either speak for or against, or potentially to offer any other information that they thought we should consider. Okay, so that's another alternative. A third alternative is the report comes to us and it's basically a charge, and then we open it up and we can have administrative hearings and trials and make a determination. Okay? We basically took the two extremes and said, we don't think either of those are the right way to go. Okay? So paper in all situations, never hearing from anybody under any circumstances, didn't seem to be the right community engagement level. The hearings on the other end, it seemed impractical. It's a whole lot of time and effort that's gone into what's been done and what's been collected. The standard of action by us under the ordinance is a lesser standard than you even have at a civil trial. Okay, it's reason to believe, so it's more like probable cause than it is a preponderance of the evidence. So it's something that should be relatively easy for us to determine as the board with a full report whether that standard has been met or not. And looking at the statistics from a number of different jurisdictions, you know, there can be hundreds of complaints, if not more, a year, and the concept of having hundreds of hearings is obviously impractical. So we proposed a middle ground, which is under normal circumstances, we will act on the paper. But if the chair, by application of the parties, can be convinced that it would benefit the board's consideration to hear some limited argument, not additional evidence, but argument, that then we would receive it. And that's the proposal that's in here as to the resolution report.
Thoughts, impressions on that? Ms. Ross?
I think we need to let Mr. Whedon look at this because complaints will not necessarily come to the board. They'll come to the COB.
Sure, sure.
So let him review this. Because, you know, we went back and forth.
Oh, absolutely.
Back and forth.
Yes.
And then maybe we can meet with Mr. Whedon And to me, it would make a whole lot more sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and we're not presenting this as something to be approved or not. This
Yeah, I
is just
know
to
that.
let you know the direction that we seem to be going.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay.
Mr. Campbell Gooch?
I think Mr. Sweeney trying to find a middle ground to where we can connect, you know what I'm saying? And I think that's the correct direction, because I felt like you wanted some confirmation that you were headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
For me, I feel like that we're going in the right direction with that process.
Thank you, Mr.
We
Campbell
got a
Gooch.
good, got
I
a good
don't,
framework.
I don't disagree with
For
that.
sure. For sure.
But I'm just saying,
Offering time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Space.
absolutely.
Mr. Cooper?
No, I want to thank the committee. I put a lot of thought into this. I think
Absolutely.
created a great product that is a good starting point for our discussion. I fully agree that the next step is for the committee to get with Mr. Whedon and get the benefit of his experience, since he's the one who's going to be running these things. But I think that's a thoughtful approach to how we handle the complaints when they come before the board, and will be a good starting point. I certainly have comments here that I will share with Mr. Whedon or whomever at the appropriate time.
Thank you.
And the next section that we have in that general category is section 4, on community comment at board meetings. And this is a proposal that we will regularly provide time for public comment, but not necessarily at every meeting. There was some discussion as to whether we should do it at every meeting. And then, of course, we all reflected that we've been having a lot of meetings. We haven't done it because we've had other things that we thought were important and that took priority, I guess maybe is a better way to put it. And things like that will come up eventually, and hopefully going forward, we'd have more time for public comment than we've taken so far, you know, than we've done. But anyway, so to put that in there regularly, but not always. And at the meetings, anybody who is a person or an organization, we had a lot of discussion with this as far as how we want to best describe who we expect to come forward, because we talked at one point about residents, and then we decided, well, residents wasn't really the right group of people that we're talking about, but we also didn't want people who were totally unengaged, you know, to come in and dominate conversation either. So we kind of took a middle ground. We said a person or organization with a direct local interest in an issue that the board has authority over, which kind of tried to capture it's a local, community-centered issue that we're trying to address, and those are the people that we want to provide the opportunity to. The exception, Part C exception that's noted in there, that's what we talked about a moment ago as far as the resolution reports. Those who are interested in speaking, we're going to ask them to sign up that day, but in advance during the 30 minutes before we start, just so that we have an idea of how many people want to speak and all like that, because we might have to make adjustments depending on who that's going to be. And then we had extended discussion about how long we should provide in there, and we looked at what Metro Council was, and if I recall right, that's where the 3 minutes came from. But then we gave the board discretion to control the process so it could extend or limit, could modify. Okay. And then in B, we have a provision there regarding those who aren't fluent in English, asking for the assistance of an interpreter. And this is one thing that may not be in our budget.
Yes, that was my main thing.
Okay.
When I was
Right,
speaking about
that we'll have to think about in the budget, because there is no publicly available resource to provide this service, and we don't know what the demand's going to be either. But people are going to have to request in advance. I think we didn't decide how many days, but some days in advance, so that we could try to make arrangements. And if it was feasible, to provide it, then we can. It may be that it's not feasible. We talked about, well, whether you should bring your own interpreter, and if that means, you're bringing your child, and whether that's a good way to go about doing this, or a husband bringing a wife, or a wife bringing a husband, and what kind of issues those can present, because they've presented in court before, where you don't get a full interpretation because you have certain cultural things that the husband might not want to say what the wife wants to explain, or whatever. Okay, so we thought it's best to try to provide translation services if we can, you know, given whatever our budget will be and the opportunities and the advance notice and language, you know, who's around to speak Ketchikan or whatever it is.
Yeah. That's totally feasible, Mr. Sweeney. That wouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
Ms. Hooker.
Thank you. On the point of the interpreter and great consideration, I ask that we include Metro Human Relations Commission as thinking partners as we're figuring out what feasibility may be. I know that that board works very hard to identify and leverage resources, and that may be a way in which we have internal Metro capacity to help facilitate that.
Thank you, Ms. Hooker. That's a great point. Thank you.
Okay, and then we had a discussion too about if somebody during the public comment period wants to bring up a matter that is within our jurisdiction to investigate, how do we handle that? And we decided that it's best to do a matter of inquiry. So if it concerns an issue of alleged police misconduct, ask them whether they have made a complaint in that regard. And if they haven't, to kind of redirect them and ask them to meet with Mr. Whedon's staff in order that we can do an investigation so that we can act on their behalf fully informed and move forward from there. If it's something that they have already made a complaint on, to explain the resolution process and that we'll be getting a report and that'll be, et cetera. So that we don't use this comment period for the purpose of addressing complaints themselves, and we use our complaint process for that as the most effective means to collect and act on information.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you, Mr. Sweeney.
And then in D, that we hold community forums, and that we hold them at least twice a year. And this is just kind of a general discussion of what they would be and how they're kind of envisioned. Okay. And then in section 5, it talks about the other types of community engagement that the staff and the board will participate in order to expand our outreach and collect information and be mutual back and forth. And in response to the executive committee's request, those are the 3 provisions that we have in the rules for that type of public comment and community engagement.
Thank you. Any thoughts or impressions? I appreciate that you weren't at the meeting, but Mr. Dickinson must have shared the spirit very easily.
He did very well.
Cleanly. Thank you. Thank you. And so between now and our next meeting, May 22nd, you could, I think, is already on the calendar for the next set of the next series of the Rules Committee meeting.
Yes,
I think
the
it's
Rules
Friday
Committee is
or-
meeting again next Monday,
Next Monday.
on
Okay.
the 30th.
Next Monday on the 30th. And so that will be posted online as well, but that would be an opportunity for input, additional insight, and opportunities to be
Right.
added in here, and then a conference between you and Mr. Whedon and the
Absolutely.
committee there. And then I would appreciate if in the same spirit of preparation that we could share this out to the board again ahead of the meeting.
Absolutely.
That we all do our due diligence and then be prepared to be guided by our wizard reader here, Mr. Dickerson. I don't know what we're going to do when we get a new legal counsel.
I asked him if he was going to apply.
He probably said hockey sticks.
I'm
and
not
then-
telling you what he said.
That's great.
I recorded it, though.
We appreciate you as well, Mr. Dickerson. We truly do. With that, any announcements or new business? One. I do have just one as a reminder, May 17th, just want to say this again, is the NACO conference at the downtown library. We had a call that was scheduled for this week that was canceled, but I'm sure that you'll receive one more email to remind you. It was shared with me that certain sections, both the opening, closing, and the general plenary sessions, will be recorded and posted on the NACOL website. And so if for some reason you can't attend part or whole, all of the conference, you will be able to see the content discussion information shared there. I will follow up within the next couple of hours once I'm able to get home here and share a spreadsheet that I received. Asked Mr. I think if I just BCC everyone, I can send that out, correct?
Should be able to.
So shouldn't need anyone to help facilitate that.
I'm sorry, I'm assuming Marcus got they were comfortable with you sending that out.
I guess so. I'm going to look at my email to make sure, and if
Okay,
not,
sure,
I'll
sure.
send him a
As long as they're
message.
okay,
Yeah, and if not, if I don't have confirmation there, then board, I'll get back to you by tomorrow morning once we can get the budget team back in place to answer the question. And otherwise, no matter what, I'll give you the 48 hours if you please to review it. And if you could, I'll send there, you send your thoughts, comments to Mr. Wheaton. That would be incredible. So let me just, to be fair here, let's say tomorrow morning by 10 a.m. So that way, if I need to connect with the budget team, I can quickly.
Would
I
it,
think
would
that
it
would be a problem.
make sense for Mr. Whedon to send that out?
I think it always makes sense for somebody other than me to send it out. Every, just help me with this practice of now no longer having to say I. So the spreadsheet, the budget, we just want to get approval that there's nothing
By
for no
what
reason.
time?
We're saying, I said tomorrow morning by 10 a.m., just to allow us to confirm if Mr. Floyd hasn't already. If Mr. Floyd has said he's gotten word back from the budget team and we're go, then we can send it.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Whedon should be off the clock here.
12.
Let's say tomorrow morning at 10
Give me
a.m.
the 12.
Give you the 12.
Give me the 12.
Chief Turner.
Nicole, May 17th, what time does the conference start?
I mean, it's a morning start. I'll confirm that. It's 8:30.
8:30?
8:30.
Downtown library?
Downtown library.
Thank you.
And we'll make sure I'll craft out. I'll send Mr. Wheaton here to send out, please, a reminder for the board here so that we can put it on our calendars. I think a calendar invite would be helpful. Any additional new business or announcements here? I appreciate the reminder here, but we are at our 2-month mark here, almost 3 here. And I think we should all take a breath in and realize that we've made a lot of accomplishments. We certainly have a lot more work ahead of us now. I'm happy that we're in this position now where we're able to hopefully bring the community in and listen. But I applaud everyone for the work we've done thus far. Let's set the bar even higher for the next couple of months here. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So move. Seconded by somebody here. I heard Ms. Hillary, Mr. Campbell Good. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nay, abstentions, the motion passes. Thank you very much. You all have a good evening.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.